Jai-ho could not sleep. Nari's proposal kept playing in his mind. Marriage was a big step, even if it was just for legal reasons. He needed to know more about why Nari had been cast out by her people. The next morning, Jai-ho went to the station's information center. He sat at a computer and began searching for information about Stellarans. Not much here, he muttered to himself. The Stellarans were private people who shared little with other species. He tried a different search, Stellaran genetic purity. This time, he found something interesting. A medical report from a human doctor who had treated a Stellaran visitor 10 years ago. The report mentioned that some Stellarans were born with enhanced emotional centers in their brains. These Stellarans experienced feelings more deeply than others. The Stellaran government called this a dangerous mutation and tracked these individuals carefully. This must be what happened to Nari, Jai-ho said to himself. As he continued reading, the information became darker. The report suggested that Stellarans with this mutation often disappeared or were sent away. The doctor believed they were being removed from Stellaran society systematically. Jai-ho felt a chill. Nari wasn't just an outcast. She was part of a group being eliminated by her own people. Just then, a message appeared on his screen. Access to this file has been logged. User identified. Jai-ho quickly closed the file, but it was too late. Someone knew what he had been reading. Later that day, Jai-ho was working in a maintenance tunnel when his boss, Ms. Park, crawled in to join him. "You're looking into dangerous things, Jai-ho," she said quietly. Jai-ho pretended to focus on his work. "I don't know what you mean." "The Stellaran files. Your interest in the alien woman." Ms. Park looked around nervously. Station security noticed. "They're watching you both." "Why would they care about Nari?" Jai-ho asked. "The Stellarans are powerful. They have technology we want. The station doesn't want to upset them." Ms. Park handed him a small data stick. "This contains more information about what happens to Stellarans like your friend. Be careful who sees you with it." Before Jai-ho could ask more questions, Ms. Park left. That evening, Jai-ho met Nari in a quiet corner of the station gardens. Few people came here, so they could talk privately. "I found information about Stellarans like you," he said. "People with stronger emotions." Nari's crystal eyes widened. "You should not look into such things. It could be dangerous. The report called it a mutation, but I think it's more than that." Jai-ho leaned closer. "It said Stellarans like you are systematically removed from society." "Why?" Nari was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "What you call emotions, my people call weakness. Long ago, Stellarans decided that feelings made us inefficient. They began breeding programs to remove emotions from our species. But some are still born with emotions," Jai-ho said. Nari nodded. "A small percentage. We are seen as a step backward in evolution, a threat to the logical order. That's why they exiled you." "Yes, but there is more." Nari looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Those with my condition can form special mental connections with other species, especially humans. The Council fears this ability most of all." Jai-ho was about to ask more when he noticed a human security officer watching them from across the garden. The officer spoke quietly into his communicator. "We're being watched," Jai-ho whispered. Nari didn't turn to look. "It has begun then. The Stellarans must know I'm here." "What does that mean?" "It means I have less time than I thought," Nari said. "Have you considered my proposal?" Jai-ho looked at the alien woman before him. In just 2 weeks, he had come to care about her. The thought of her being sent away, or worse, returned to people who would harm her, was unbearable. "Yes," he said, "I'll marry you." Relief filled Nari's face. "Thank you." Jai-ho took her hand. "But first, we need to understand what we're up against. I think both our peoples may try to stop us." As they left the garden, neither noticed the small camera that had recorded their entire conversation, or the Stellaran ship that had just requested emergency docking at Nexus Station. 3 days had passed since Nari arrived at Nexus Station. She sat alone in her small room, watching the stars through her window. The station had given her basic quarters in the alien sector, but she had barely left the room. Suddenly, alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed in the hallway outside her door. "Attention all residents," a voice announced over the speakers. "Environmental system failure in Sector 12. Please stay in your rooms while repairs are made." Nari felt her chest tighten. Sector 12 was where she was staying. If the environmental systems failed completely, the air could become toxic for her. Her suit could only help for a short time. A knock came at her door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see the human engineer from the docking bay. "Jai-Ho," she said, remembering his name. He smiled. "Good memory. I've been sent to fix the air systems in this sector. Just checking if you're okay while I work." Nari nodded. "My suit is functioning, but it has limited power. It will only last 6 hours without station support. I'll have it fixed before then," Jai-Ho promised. He turned to go, then paused. "Would you like to come with me? It might be safer than staying here, and I could use some help." Nari hesitated. On Stellara, people worked alone unless absolutely necessary. Asking for help was seen as weakness. Offering help to an outcast would bring shame. "You want my assistance?" she asked. "If you're willing," Jai-Ho said. "The control panel has some strange readings. You might notice something I don't." Curious, Nari followed Jai-Ho through the corridors. They'd reached a large panel in the wall where Jai-Ho removed the cover to reveal a complex system of wires and screens. "The main regulator is failing," Jai-Ho explained as he worked. "It controls the mix of gases in this sector." Nari watched him carefully. His hands moved with confidence, but she could see he was puzzled by some of the readings. "May I look?" she asked. Jai-Ho stepped aside. "Please do." Nari studied the panel. Though not an engineer, all Stellarans received basic technical training. She noticed something odd. "The nitrogen levels are too high," she said. "That would explain why my suit kept giving warnings." Jai-Ho checked his readings again. "You're right. But why didn't the sensors catch it?" He dug deeper into the system and found the problem. "The calibration is off. It's been slowly changing the air mix for days." As Jai-Ho fixed the system, Nari noticed her environmental suit was struggling. The air in the corridor was becoming harder to breathe. She tried not to show distress, but her breathing became shallow. Jai-Ho noticed immediately. "Your suit is failing, isn't it?" Nari nodded, not wanting to waste breath on words. Without hesitation, Jai-Ho removed an oxygen mask from his toolkit and held it out to her. "Use this. It's clean." Nari stared at the mask. On Stellara, sharing breathing equipment was very personal, only done between family members. For a stranger to offer such help was shocking. But she needed air. She took the mask and breathed deeply. "Thank you," she said when she could speak again. Jai-Ho returned to his work. No need for thanks. Anyone would do the same. But Nari knew that wasn't true. No Stellaran would help an outcast this way. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You do not know me." Jai-Ho looked surprised by the question. "You needed help. That's enough reason." He finished the repairs, and fresh air began flowing through the vents. Nari's suit beeped as it reconnected to the station's systems. "There," Jai-Ho said with satisfaction. "All fixed." "You are very different from my people," Nari said quietly. "How so?" "Stellarans believe in helping only when it is logical, only when there is clear benefit. You help simply because there is need." Jai-Ho shrugged. "That's just being human." For the first time since arriving on the station, Nari felt something like hope. Perhaps being among humans would not be as terrible as she had feared. "I have much to learn about humans," she said. Jai-Ho smiled. "And I'd like to learn about Stellarans. Well, at least about you. Would you join me for a meal tomorrow? I could show you the station." Neri felt a strange flutter in her chest. Was this what it felt like to make a friend? Yes, she said. I would like that. 2 weeks had passed since Neri first met Jai-ho. They had shared meals together almost every day. Ji-ho had shown her around Nexus Station, introducing her to the markets, gardens, and observation decks. Neri was sitting in the station's common area, watching the large screen that displayed station news. A message flashed across the screen that made her heart sink. No Tai Si. All non-citizens must secure resident sponsorship within 30 days or face deportation. New station policy effective immediately. Neri felt cold fear spread through her body. Without citizenship anywhere, she had no place to go. Stellarans would not take her back. Other planets would not accept a Stellaran outcast. She rushed to the administration office. A human woman sat behind the desk. How can I get sponsorship? Neri asked. The woman barely looked up from her screen. You need a citizen to sponsor you. Usually a family member, employer, or spouse. I have no family here. No employer has hired me, Neri said, her voice shaking slightly. The woman finally looked at her, noticing she was Stellaran. Her eyes widened in surprise. A Stellaran? That's unusual. Your government usually handles these matters. I am no longer recognized by my government, Neri said quietly. The woman's face softened slightly. I see. Well, without sponsorship, you'll have to leave the station in 30 days. Neri left the office feeling lost. As she walked back to her room, an idea began to form in her mind. It was bold, perhaps even inappropriate by Stellaran standards. But she was no longer bound by those standards. That evening, she waited for Jai-ho at their usual meeting spot in the station cafe. Her hands trembled as she prepared to say words no proper Stellaran would ever speak. Jai-ho arrived with his usual smile. Sorry I'm late. Had to fix a water recycler that exploded all over me. His uniform was still damp in places. I must speak with you about something important, Neri said. Jai-ho's smile faded when he saw her serious expression. What's wrong? The station has announced a new policy. Non-citizens must secure sponsorship or leave within 30 days. That's sudden, Jai-ho said, frowning. What will you do? Neri took a deep breath. I have a proposal for you. It is unusual. Jai-ho waited, watching her carefully. Human laws allow citizens to sponsor non-citizens through employment, family connection, or marriage, she said, her voice growing quieter with each word. Jai-ho's eyes widened as he understood what she was suggesting. You want me to marry you? He asked, his voice full of surprise. It would be a marriage of convenience only, Neri said quickly. I would not expect anything emotional. It is simply a legal arrangement for my survival. Jai-ho sat back in his chair, clearly shocked by her request. Neri, marriage is a serious thing for humans. I understand. That is why I offer something in return. Neri leaned forward. I have knowledge of Stellaran technology that would be valuable to an engineer like you. Knowledge I am no longer bound to keep secret. Jai-ho shook his head. I can't marry someone for technology secrets. Then what would make it acceptable? Neri asked. Desperation crept into her voice. I have nowhere to go, Jai-ho. No world will take me. Jai-ho's face showed his internal struggle. He had grown to like Neri over these past weeks. She was intelligent and curious, and beneath her reserved exterior, he had glimpsed genuine kindness. I need time to think about this, he finally said. It's not a small thing you're asking. I understand, Neri said, though her heart sank. You have 28 days to decide. Jai-ho managed a small smile at her attempt at humor. I won't take that long. He reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. The first time he had ever done so. Whatever happens, I won't let you face this alone, he promised. As he left, Neri watched him go. In just 2 weeks, this human had shown her more kindness than she had experienced in years among her own people. Whether he agreed to her proposal or not, she knew she had found something rare, a true friend. But friendship might not be enough to save her from deportation. Jai-ho could not sleep. Nari's proposal kept playing in his mind. Marriage was a big step, even if it was just for legal reasons. He needed to know more about why Nari had been cast out by her people. The next morning, Jai-ho went to the station's information center. He sat at a computer and began searching for information about Stellarans. Not much here, he muttered to himself. The Stellarans were private people who shared little with other species. He tried a different search, Stellaran genetic purity. This time, he found something interesting. A medical report from a human doctor who had treated a Stellaran visitor 10 years ago. The report mentioned that some Stellarans were born with enhanced emotional centers in their brains. These Stellarans experienced feelings more deeply than others. The Stellaran government called this a dangerous mutation and tracked these individuals carefully. This must be what happened to Nari, Jai-ho said to himself. As he continued reading, the information became darker. The report suggested that Stellarans with this mutation often disappeared or were sent away. The doctor believed they were being removed from Stellaran society systematically. Jai-ho felt a chill. Nari wasn't just an outcast. She was part of a group being eliminated by her own people. Just then, a message appeared on his screen. Access to this file has been logged. User identified. Jai-ho quickly closed the file, but it was too late. Someone knew what he had been reading. Later that day, Jai-ho was working in a maintenance tunnel when his boss, Ms. Park, crawled in to join him. "You're looking into dangerous things, Jai-ho," she said quietly. Jai-ho pretended to focus on his work. "I don't know what you mean." "The Stellaran files. Your interest in the alien woman." Ms. Park looked around nervously. Station security noticed. "They're watching you both." "Why would they care about Nari?" Jai-ho asked. "The Stellarans are powerful. They have technology we want. The station doesn't want to upset them." Ms. Park handed him a small data stick. "This contains more information about what happens to Stellarans like your friend. Be careful who sees you with it." Before Jai-ho could ask more questions, Ms. Park left. That evening, Jai-ho met Nari in a quiet corner of the station gardens. Few people came here, so they could talk privately. "I found information about Stellarans like you," he said. "People with stronger emotions." Nari's crystal eyes widened. "You should not look into such things. It could be dangerous. The report called it a mutation, but I think it's more than that." Jai-ho leaned closer. "It said Stellarans like you are systematically removed from society." "Why?" Nari was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "What you call emotions, my people call weakness. Long ago, Stellarans decided that feelings made us inefficient. They began breeding programs to remove emotions from our species. But some are still born with emotions," Jai-ho said. Nari nodded. "A small percentage. We are seen as a step backward in evolution, a threat to the logical order. That's why they exiled you." "Yes, but there is more." Nari looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Those with my condition can form special mental connections with other species, especially humans. The Council fears this ability most of all." Jai-ho was about to ask more when he noticed a human security officer watching them from across the garden. The officer spoke quietly into his communicator. "We're being watched," Jai-ho whispered. Nari didn't turn to look. "It has begun then. The Stellarans must know I'm here." "What does that mean?" "It means I have less time than I thought," Nari said. "Have you considered my proposal?" Jai-ho looked at the alien woman before him. In just 2 weeks, he had come to care about her. The thought of her being sent away, or worse, returned to people who would harm her, was unbearable. "Yes," he said, "I'll marry you." Relief filled Nari's face. "Thank you." Jai-ho took her hand. "But first, we need to understand what we're up against. I think both our peoples may try to stop us." As they left the garden, Neither noticed the small camera that had recorded their entire conversation, or the Stellarin ship that had just requested emergency docking at Nexus Station. Jai-ho and Neri decided to have the wedding as soon as possible. They found an old meeting room on a quiet level of the station. Captain Yuna, the highest-ranking Korean officer on the station, agreed to perform the ceremony. "Are you sure about this?" Ms. Park asked Jai-ho as she helped him put on a clean uniform jacket. "Marriage is a big step, even if it's just for papers." "I'm sure," Jai-ho said, though his hand shook slightly as he fixed his collar. "Neri needs help. I can give it." Ms. Park smiled sadly. "You always try to fix everything, don't you?" In another room, Neri was preparing alone. She had no fancy clothes, just her standard gray station uniform. She had washed her silver scales until they shone with rainbow colors in the light. Among Stellarans, making one's scales shine this way was considered too emotional, too showy. But today, Neri wanted to look her best. A knock came at her door. When she opened it, she found Jai-ho's robot helper, Blink, floating there with a small box. "Gift from Jai-ho," the robot said in its simple voice. Inside the box was a small silver pin shaped like a star. A note read, "Stars shine no matter who is watching. Wear this today. Jai-ho." Neri felt something warm spread through her chest as she pinned it to her uniform. When the time came, Neri walked into the meeting room alone. She was surprised to see that about 20 people had gathered. Most were humans who worked with Jai-ho, but there were also a few aliens from other species. Jai-ho stood at the front with Captain Yuna. He smiled when he saw Neri, and his eyes noticed the star pin right away. As Neri walked toward Jai-ho, she sensed something strange. Her emotional abilities, always stronger than normal Stellarans, seemed to be reaching out toward Jai-ho. She could feel faint traces of his nervousness, his kindness, and something else, a genuine care for her well-being. This had never happened before. Stellarans couldn't read emotions from other species. Yet somehow she was sensing Jai-ho's feelings. "We are gathered here today," Captain Yuna began, "to join this man and this woman in marriage according to Earth law and station regulations." As the captain spoke the traditional words, Neri found herself focusing more on the strange connection growing between her and Jai-ho. With each passing moment, she could sense more of his emotions. "Jai-ho, do you take Neri to be your lawfully wedded wife, to protect and support, until the end of your contract?" Jai-ho smiled at the captain's adjustment of the traditional vows to fit their situation. "I do," he said firmly. "Neri, do you take Jai-ho to be your lawfully wedded husband, to protect and support, until the end of your contract?" "I do," Neri said, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. "Then by the power given to me as captain of this sector, I pronounce you husband and wife." A cheer went up from the small crowd. Jai-ho took Neri's hand and squeezed it gently. As their hands touched, the emotional connection flared stronger. Neri gasped softly as she felt a wave of Jai-ho's happiness wash over her. This was beyond anything mentioned in Stellaran records about emotional abilities. The small celebration afterward was simple. People congratulated them and shared food and drinks. Neri noticed that some humans from station security were watching from the doorway, but not interfering. "Are you okay?" Jai-ho asked quietly when they had a moment alone. "You seem distracted." "Something unexpected is happening," Neri whispered. "I can sense your emotions. It should not be possible." Jai-ho looked surprised. "You can tell what I'm feeling." "Not clearly, but yes. It started during the ceremony and grows stronger." Neri's crystal eyes met his. "This is what the Stellaran Council fears most, the bond between our kinds." Before Jai-ho could respond, a station-wide announcement came over the speakers. "Attention all personnel. A Stellaran diplomatic vessel has docked. All staff are to give full cooperation to our distinguished visitors." Neri's face paled, her scales losing their rainbow shine. "They're here for me." Jai-ho took her hand firmly. You're my wife now, under human law. They can't just take you." But the worry in his eyes told a different story. The celebration ended quickly after the announcement. Jeho took Nari back to his quarters, which were now their shared home according to station records. "We need a plan," Jeho said as the door closed behind them. "The Stillerans won't give up easily." Before Nari could respond, Jeho's communication device beeped. It was Ms. Park. "Jeho, 3 Stellaran officials are looking for you and Nari," she said, her voice tense. "They claim she is Stellaran property and your marriage is invalid." "Property?" Jeho's face flushed with anger. "She's a person, not property." "I know," Miss Park said, "but the station manager is nervous. The Stillerans are offering new technology in exchange for cooperation." Nari's crystal eyes dimmed with fear. "They are not officials," she said quietly. "They are genetic hunters. They track down and capture people like me." "How long do we have?" Jeho asked Ms. Park. "Not long. Security is coming to your quarters in 20 minutes. The manager wants to discuss the situation." After the call ended, Jeho moved quickly. He grabbed a small bag and filled it with food, water, and basic tools. "We need to hide," he told Nari. "I know the maintenance tunnels better than anyone on this station. We can use them to stay out of sight." Nari looked doubtful. "They will find us eventually." "Not if we keep moving," Jeho said. He went to a panel in the wall and removed it, revealing a narrow tunnel. "This leads to the lower levels. Let's go." They crawled through the tight space until they reached a junction where they could stand. Jeho replaced the panel behind them, hiding their entry point. For hours, they moved through the hidden network of tunnels that ran behind the walls and floors of Nexus Station. Jeho knew every turn, every shortcut. Nari followed, trusting him completely. "Who are these genetic hunters?" Jeho asked as they rested in a small maintenance room deep in the station. "They are Stillerans bred specifically to track people with my condition," Nari explained. "They have enhanced senses but no emotions at all. They cannot be reasoned with or persuaded." "How do they find you?" "They can sense the brain patterns of emotional Stellarans, but they must be close, within about 100 meters. Jeho nodded, thinking. "Then we need to stay far from main areas." As they continued their journey through the tunnels, Nari stumbled from exhaustion. Jeho caught her before she fell. "Are you okay?" he asked, holding her arm. As they touched, the strange connection between them flared again. This time, Jeho felt it too. A warm sensation spread up his arm, and suddenly he could sense Nari's fear and tiredness. "What was that?" he asked, pulling back in surprise. Nari stared at him. "You felt it too." "The connection." Jeho nodded. "I felt afraid, but it wasn't my fear. It was yours." "This should not be possible," Nari whispered. "The bond forms so quickly. The council was right to fear it." They continued moving, both shaken by this new development. As they crawled through a narrow section, Jeho suddenly stopped. "Voices ahead," he whispered. They listened carefully. 2 people were talking in the corridor beyond the wall. "The human station manager has promised full cooperation," a flat, emotionless voice said. "The defective one cannot hide for long." "And what of the human she paired with?" another voice asked. "He is irrelevant. If he interferes, he will be eliminated." Jeho and Nari looked at each other in the dim light of the tunnel. The threat was clear. "They will kill you if you stay with me," Nari whispered. Jeho's jaw tightened. "Let them try." He checked his map of the station on a small device. "There's an unused storage area 3 levels down. We can rest there and make a better plan." As they continued their escape through the dark tunnels, the bond between them grew stronger. Without words, they began to sense each other's feelings, each other's thoughts. It was frightening and wonderful at the same time. "Is this what the Stillerans fear?" Jeho asked as they climbed down a ladder to a lower level. "This connection. Yes, Neri said, because it cannot be controlled. It cannot be stopped. And it proves that emotions are not weakness. They are power. Jiho and Neri found the abandoned storage room deep in the lower levels of Nexus Station. It was dusty and cold, but it was safe for now. Jiho used his tools to lock the door from the inside. We should be okay here for a while, he said, setting up a small light. The hunters won't be able to track us this far down. Neri sat on an old crate, her silver scales dull with exhaustion. They will not give up. The council wants all of my kind eliminated. Jiho sat beside her. Why? What makes you so dangerous to them? Neri was quiet for a long time. Then she looked at Jiho with her crystal eyes. It is time I told you everything, she said. You deserve to know what you're risking your life for. Jiho nodded, waiting. Long ago, Stellarans were not like they are now, Neri began. Our ancestors felt emotions deeply, like I do. They formed bonds with each other, and even with other species. What changed? Jiho asked. War, a terrible war with another species. Our leaders decided that emotions made us weak, vulnerable. They began a program to breed emotions out of our people. Neri's voice grew sad. Over many generations, most Stellarans became what they are today. Logical, cold, efficient. But not all of you, Jiho said. No, some children are still born with the old genes, the ability to feel deeply. The council calls us defective, but we are actually a return to what Stellarans once were. As Neri spoke, Jiho felt the strange connection between them growing stronger. He could sense her sadness, her fear, but also a small spark of hope. There's more, isn't there, he asked, about this bond between us. Neri nodded. It is called the resonance. In ancient times, Stellarans with my abilities could form deep mental bonds with compatible species, especially humans. The connection allowed sharing of emotions, thoughts, even memories. Is that what's happening to us? Jiho asked in wonder. Yes, but it should not happen so quickly. The old stories say it takes months for a resonance to form. Ours began almost instantly. Neri looked down at her hands. The marriage ceremony may have triggered it. Human marriage rituals focus on emotional connection, something that accelerates the resonance. Jiho smiled. So our fake marriage turned into a real connection after all. Neri's scales shimmered with color, showing her emotions. The resonance is why the council fears my kind so much. They cannot control it. They cannot stop it. It proves that their whole society is built on a lie, that emotions are not weakness but strength. Jiho reached out and took Neri's hand. The connection between them flared brightly. In that moment, they could feel each other's thoughts clearly. I can see your memories, Jiho whispered in awe. Your home world, it's beautiful. And I can see Earth through your eyes, Neri said. The oceans, the mountains. For several minutes, they sat in silence, experiencing each other's lives through the resonance. Jiho felt Neri's pain of rejection, her years of hiding her true nature. Neri felt Jiho's loneliness on the station, his yearning to connect with others. When they finally let go of each other's hands, something had changed between them. The marriage that had begun as a legal arrangement had become something neither of them had expected. Now you understand why they want to find me so badly, Neri said. If others learned that Stellarans and humans could bond this way, it would destroy the foundation of Stellaran society. Jiho nodded slowly. So what do we do now? Before Neri could answer, they heard a noise outside the storage room. Metal scraped against metal. Voices murmured in the corridor. They found us, Neri whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Jiho quickly gathered their things. There's another way out through the ventilation system. He pointed to a small opening near the ceiling. As they prepared to escape again, Jiho felt a surge of determination through their bond. It wasn't just his own. It was Neri's too. We'll find a way through this, he promised. Together. And for the first time since being exiled, Nari truly believed it might be possible. For 3 days, Jai-Ho and Nari moved through the hidden parts of Nexus Station. They slept in small maintenance rooms and ate emergency rations. The genetic hunters searched everywhere, getting closer each time. On the 4th day, Jai-Ho received a message from Ms. Park on his emergency communicator. "The situation has changed," she said. "The Stellarin Council has declared you an enemy for stealing Stellarin property. They demand you both be handed over." "What did the station manager say?" Jai-Ho asked. "That's the surprising part," Ms. Park replied. "Captain Yuna refused. She said that your marriage is legal under human law, and Neri is now under Earth protection." Jai-Ho felt hope for the first time in days. "So we can come out of hiding?" "Not yet. Meet me at Docking Bay 12 in 2 hours. Captain Yuna wants to speak with you both." When Jai-Ho told Neri the news, her crystal eyes brightened. "Your captain is brave to stand against the council." "That's humanity for you," Jai-Ho said with a smile. "We can be stubborn when someone tries to bully us." They made their way carefully to Docking Bay 12, avoiding main corridors. When they arrived, they found not only Ms. Park and Captain Yuna, but also 20 other humans from the station. Jai-Ho, Nari, Captain Yuna greeted them. "We've been worried about you." "Why are all these people here?" Jai-Ho asked, looking around at the gathered humans. "They're here to support you," Ms. Park said. "Word has spread about what the Stellarans are doing to people like Nari. No one thinks it's right." Captain Yuna stepped forward. "The Stellarin Council has escalated this to a diplomatic incident. They claim we are interfering in their internal matters." "What will happen now?" Nari asked, her voice small. "That depends on what happens in the next few minutes," Captain Yuna said, checking the time. "The council representatives are coming here to make their final demand." Jai-Ho moved closer to Nari, taking her hand. Through their bond, he felt her fear, but also her determination. The doors to the docking bay opened. 3 Stellarans entered, their silver scales perfectly uniform, their faces showing no emotion. Behind them came the station manager, looking nervous. "Captain Yuna," the lead Stellaran said, "you are harboring a defective Stellaran and interfering with our laws. Hand over the defective one and the human who aided her." Captain Yuna stood tall. "Nari is married to a human citizen. Under our laws, she has rights and protections. Your laws do not apply to Stellaran matters," the Stellaran said coldly. "Actually, they do," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see a human woman in a formal uniform enter the bay. "I am Admiral Lee, Earth representative to the Galactic Council, and I have something to show you." Admiral Lee activated a screen on the wall. It showed images of other Stellarans like Nari, being helped by various species across the galaxy. "While you've been hunting Nari, we've been investigating your genetic purity program," Admiral Lee said. "We found dozens of Stellarans you've cast out. They've told us everything." The Stellaran delegates showed no emotion, but their scales dulled slightly. "This is not your concern," one said. "It became our concern when you threatened our citizens," Admiral Lee replied. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the evidence and made a ruling. The persecution of emotionally capable Stellarans is now classified as a rights violation. All such individuals are granted protected status." Murmurs spread through the room. The Stellarans stood still, processing this development. Furthermore, Admiral Lee continued, "We have learned about the resonance bond between humans and emotional Stellarans. Far from being a defect, it represents a unique opportunity for cooperation between our species." Through their bond, Jai-Ho could feel Nari's amazement and hope rising. The lead Stellaran spoke again. "The Council will not accept this interference. They already have," Admiral Lee said, showing another message on the screen. "Faced with sanctions from 12 species, your government has agreed to recognize the rights of all Stellarans, including those with emotional capacity." The genetic hunters had no choice but to leave empty-handed. As they departed, the humans in the room cheered. Jai-Ho turned to Nari, whose scales were now shimmering with bright colors. "It's over," he said. "You're free." "Because of you," Neri said. "Because humans understand something my people forgot long ago, that emotions aren't weakness, they're strength." Jaiho smiled. "So, what happens now with us? Is our marriage still just for convenience?" Neri's crystal eyes met his. Through their resonance, he could feel her answer before she spoke it. "I think we both know it's much more than that now."